Hey folks, and welcome. I wanted to do a quick update video for those of you who are following the developing income store story, especially if you are interested in the Empire Flippers involvement. If you're following the story, you know that Empire Flippers has been sued by the receiver and her team from the income store, and that lawsuit was actually put on pause so the parties could participate in what we call a settlement conference or a mediation. Basically, it's something they're doing early on in the case so they could figure out whether or not the case could be resolved without having to go all the way through and spend a whole lot of money. That apparently happened on March 18th, and on April 7th, the receiver actually filed a motion to get the court's approval for a settlement. Now, the receiver didn't just sue Empire Flippers. There were multiple lawsuits that were filed at the end of 2020. So the cases that the receiver is looking for approval to settle is the case against William Longcourt, Don Shire Ministries, and Empire Flippers. In the Don Shire Ministries case, the receiver was seeking the return of $72,000. And to settle that case, apparently Don Shire Ministries has agreed to pay a one lump sum payment of $50,000. The receiver sued William Longcourt for $429,000. And to resolve the case, apparently Mr. Longcourt has agreed to pay a lump sum one time of $22,500. And as you will recall, the Empire Flippers suit, the receiver sought the return of close to $2 million. And it looks like, to resolve the case, Empire Flippers has agreed to pay a one-time lump sum payment of $250,000. Most likely, the parties are looking to get a release of claims, basically an agreement from the receiver and her team that they won't be sued or dragged into lawsuits for anything else. Like, this is it. This is all they're going to be liable for. I think it's interesting and should be noted that on page 6 of this motion for approval of the settlement, there is a small footnote that I think is pretty important. It says, the release expressly excludes any and all claims the receiver may have against the sellers of the domains or websites for which Empire Flippers served as the broker. So basically, the receiver is reserving the right to sue the sellers of the websites that Income Store bought. It says the receiver is investigating these claims and expects to commence actions against certain of those sellers during the next reporting period. Oh boy! Woo! Anybody else sweating a little bit? Luckily, that's not me. That's the first time we really heard anything from the receiver that she's planning on going after the sellers of those sites. And that's something that we've wondered, maybe that will happen, but wow. Expects to commence during the next reporting period. In this motion, and not surprisingly, the receiver has also requested the ability to carve out her and her team's 33% contingent fee for recovering on these claims, plus their costs. So in the Don Shire settlement, the receiver's legal team is going to be able to collect $17,000. In the Longcourt settlement, they're going to pay themselves close to $8,000. And in the Empire Flippers settlement, they're going to pay themselves almost $83,000. Presumably, the remainder of those fees will go into the pot of the assets that the receiver is managing and is using to pay and to deal with costs and expenses associated with Income Store. And if you've been paying attention, the receiver has regularly been filing motions with the court to pay herself, like pay the legal team and their experts. And while I don't know this for sure, it would not surprise me if those additional monies end up getting eaten up in the Income Store main lawsuit, paying forensic experts, pursuing claims, doing investigation, paying whatever team is necessary to maintain the assets of the business that the investors don't take back. So ultimately, is anybody winning here? Probably just the lawyers. Now, I mentioned the fact that Empire Flippers had agreed to settle and had agreed to pay to a colleague of mine, and one of their first thoughts was, oh my gosh, doesn't that make Empire Flippers like look bad because they agreed to pay money to pay off a lawsuit that alleged that they committed fraud? And I guess if you're unfamiliar with the legal system, maybe you would think so. My personal opinion is that this decision was a business decision. If you knew for certain that you were going to lose a lot of money and there was nothing you could do about it, and somebody presented you with an option to lose less money, you don't think that you would take it? It does make me think back to the blog post that was posted by Empire Flippers, I think at the beginning of March, where they just came out and said that they were willing to pay $300,000 in order to resolve all of this. They basically just made their opening shot. Let's settle it and we'll pay out $30,000 to the investors. They just didn't want to give any money to the lawyers. They wanted that money to go to the investors. Sadly, I doubt that either of those things is going to happen. I think the lawyers are going to get some of that money, as we can see by the motion that they filed, and I think it's pretty unlikely that the investors will see any of it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this makes Empire Flippers look bad? Do you disagree with me? I'd like to know.